Amara stood at the edge of the dusty road, her suitcase in hand, as the evening sun cast a warm golden glow over the Nigerian village she once called home. The familiar scent of burning wood and the distant laughter of children playing brought back a flood of memories. It had been 10 years since she left for Lagos, pursuing education and a life beyond the boundaries of this small Igbo community. Now, at 25, she returned, not for a joyous reunion, but to mourn her father's unexpected passing. The ancestral compound loomed ahead, its once vibrant walls now faded and overgrown with vines. The large wooden gates, adorned with intricate carvings of Igbo deities, stood partially open, almost as if beckoning her inside yet warning her to stay away. As she stepped through the threshold, a chill ran down her spine. The air felt heavier here, thick with the weight of unspoken secrets and lingering shadows. Her mother emerged from the main house, her face a mask of sorrow and something else Amara couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Beside her stood Chaik, her younger brother, now a tall and stern-faced man. The warm embraces she expected were replaced with stiff nods and hollow pleasantries. An unsettling silence hung between them, only broken by the distant call of a mourning dove. "You're finally home," her mother said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Yes, Mama. I came as soon as I heard," Amara replied, searching her mother's eyes for a trace of the warmth she remembered. "Come inside. There's much to discuss," Chaik interjected, turning abruptly toward the house. As they walked inside, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The house felt different, darker, colder, as if the very walls held their breath. Family portraits lined the hallway, eyes following her every move. A particular painting caught her attention. Her father standing proudly before a locked door she didn't recognize. Before she could ask, her mother called her into the sitting room. The sitting room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn despite the waning daylight outside. Amara sat on the edge of an ornate chair, its once plush cushions now worn and threadbare. Her mother and Chaik sat opposite her, their faces partially obscured by shadow. "We need to talk about your father's will," her mother began, her hands trembling slightly as she poured tea into delicate china cups. "He left specific instructions, ones that must be followed precisely." Amara sipped the bitter tea, its taste unsettling. "What kind of instructions?" Chaik leaned forward, his gaze intense. "There are duties we must uphold, traditions that cannot be broken. As the eldest child, certain responsibilities fall upon you." A knot formed in Amara's stomach. What responsibilities? Why hasn't anyone mentioned this before? Her mother exchanged a wary glance with Chaik. "It's not something we discuss openly," she said softly. "There are family obligations tied to our lineage." Frustration bubbled within her. "Mama, please. I've been away, but I'm still part of this family. I deserve to know what's going on." Her mother sighed heavily. "All in due time, Amara. For now, rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." As she retired to her old bedroom, Amara couldn't escape the feeling that they were hiding something dark and unsettling. The night air was thick, and the usual sounds of the village seemed distant, muffled. Sleep did not come easily. The next morning, Amara awoke early, determined to reacquaint herself with the home she once knew so well. Wandering the hallways, she noticed subtle changes, the absence of certain family heirlooms, new locks on familiar doors. As she turned a corner, she found herself facing a door she had never seen before at the end of a narrow corridor. The door was made of heavy oak, adorned with intricate carvings similar to those on the front gate. A large iron padlock secured it, the metal cold and unyielding when she touched it. An uneasy feeling settled over her. Why would there be a locked room in their home? What could possibly be inside? "Amara," Chaik's voice echoed down the hallway, startling her. She turned to see him approaching, his expression stern. "What are you doing here?" he asked sharply. "I was just exploring. I don't remember this door." He stepped between her and the door, his posture defensive. "Some parts of the house are off-limits. It's best you respect that." She raised an eyebrow. "Off-limits? In my own home?" Chaik's eyes softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. Please, Amara, just trust me on this. Reluctantly, she nodded, but the seed of curiosity had already been planted. As she walked away, she could feel Chaik's gaze burning into her back. Determined to find answers, Amara decided to search for clues. She remembered that her father often kept personal items in the attic, a place she and Chaik used to play as children. Climbing the creaky stairs, she was greeted by a cloud of dust and the familiar scent of old wood. Boxes upon boxes were stacked haphazardly, filled with relics of the past, faded photographs, letters, and trinkets from generations before. As she sifted through the contents, a small leather-bound journal caught her eye. It was her father's handwriting. Settling into a corner, she began to read. The journal detailed aspects of their family's history she had never known, references to ancient rituals, bloodlines, and a sacred duty passed down through generations. The entries grew darker, mentioning sacrifices and a binding pact with ancestral spirits. Her heart raced as the pieces began to fit together. The locked door, the secretive behavior, the sudden death of her father. It all pointed to something far more sinister than she could have imagined. A floorboard creaked below, snapping her out of her thoughts. Closing the journal, she tucked it under her arm and quietly made her way back to her room, careful not to alert anyone to her discovery. That evening, Amara confronted her mother. "I found Papa's journal," she said, placing it on the table between them. "I know about the rituals, the sacrifices. What is this sacred duty he wrote about?" Her mother's face paled, eyes widening in fear. "You shouldn't have found that," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the doorway. "It's not meant for you. Not meant for me." Amara scoffed. "I'm part of this family. I deserve to know the truth." Her mother sighed deeply, tears welling in her eyes. "Our family is bound by an ancient covenant. To protect our lineage and ensure prosperity, a sacrifice must be made every generation." Amara felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. "A sacrifice? You can't be serious." "It's the only way," her mother insisted. "Your father fulfilled his duty, and now what?" Amara demanded, her voice rising. "You expect me to continue this madness?" Chaik entered the room, his expression unreadable. "It's our way, Amara. We don't have a choice." She looked between them, disbelief and anger coursing through her veins. "There's always a choice." Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly oppressive. Amara felt like a prisoner in her own home, watched constantly by Chaik and her mother. Whispers followed her wherever she went, and villagers she once knew now avoided her gaze. One night, unable to sleep, she overheard a hushed conversation between her mother and Chaik. "She must fulfill her role," her mother said urgently. "If she doesn't, the consequences will be dire." "I know," Chaik replied. "But she's resisting. Perhaps we need to persuade her." Amara's blood ran cold. She needed to get out to escape this nightmare. Quietly, she packed a small bag and slipped out of her room, intent on leaving the village behind. As she reached the front door, Chaik stepped out of the shadows. "Going somewhere?" he asked, blocking her path. "Get out of my way," she hissed. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that," he replied, his eyes reflecting a darkness she didn't recognize. "The family depends on you." Forced back into the house, Amara was taken to the locked door. This time it stood open, the darkness beyond beckoning ominously. "It's time you understood," her mother said, her voice void of emotion. They led her into a dimly lit chamber adorned with candles and symbols etched into the stone walls. The air was thick with incense and an undercurrent of something metallic, blood. In the center stood an altar, stained and foreboding. "This is our legacy," Chaik said solemnly. "Our family's power comes at a price." Amara recoiled. "I won't be a part of this. This is evil." Her mother stepped forward. "If we don't honor the covenant, the spirits will exact their own vengeance. We've already delayed too long." "Then let them," Amara challenged. "I won't sacrifice innocent lives for some twisted tradition." A low rumble echoed through the chamber, and the candles flickered violently. The very ground seemed to tremble beneath them. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candles. Shadows stretched and morphed, forming shapes that resembled human figures. Whispered voices filled the air, speaking in a language long forgotten. Her mother and Chaik fell to their knees. "Spirits, hear us," they chanted. "We offer ourselves in penance." Amara stood firm. "I reject this. I won't be bound by your sins." The shadows advanced, encircling her. Cold seeped into her bones, and for a moment, she felt an overwhelming despair. But then a warmth blossomed within her chest, a defiant strength. "You have no power over me," she declared. "I break this cycle now." The chamber shook violently, and the symbols on the walls began to crack and crumble. The shadows recoiled, their forms dissipating like smoke. Realizing that the only way to end this was to destroy the source, Amara seized a torch from the wall. "What are you doing?" Chaik shouted, reaching out to stop her. "I'm ending this," she replied, igniting the altar. Flames erupted, quickly spreading to the tapestries and wooden beams. Her mother screamed, "Oh, you'll doom us all. Better to face the wrath of spirits than continue this horror," Amara retorted. The fire consumed the chamber rapidly. Chaik grabbed her arm. "We have to get out." Amara pulled free. "Oh, save yourself." He hesitated but then turned, dragging their hysterical mother with him. As they fled, Amara remained, watching the flames engulf the symbols of their family's dark past. The ceiling began to collapse, debris falling around her. Amidst the chaos, she felt a profound peace. The weight of generations lifted, if only for a moment. Days later, the village gathered before the smoldering ruins of the ancestral home. Whispers spread of the tragedy, the loss of Amara, the destruction of a legacy. Chaik stood among them, his face etched with grief and something else, remorse. Their mother had fallen ill, her mind lost to despair. But something had changed. The oppressive atmosphere that once clung to the village was gone. Children laughed freely, and the sun seemed to shine brighter. In the quiet moments, Chaik thought he could hear Amara's voice carried on the wind, a gentle reminder of her sacrifice and the price of freedom. Amara's actions had not only broken the curse but had set in motion a healing process for all those bound by the chains of the past. Her courage became legend, a tale told to remind future generations of the power of choice and the importance of facing one's demons. Years passed, and the story of Amara became part of the village's fabric. A memorial stood where the ancestral home once was, a simple monument bearing her name and the inscription, "She who broke the chains." Chaik dedicated his life to making amends, turning the family's remaining land into a community center and school. The knowledge of the past was preserved, not to glorify it, but to learn from it. And though Amara was gone, her spirit lived on in the hearts of those she freed. The village thrived, unburdened by the darkness that once overshadowed it. In the end, Amara's legacy was not one of tragedy, but of hope, a testament to the strength found in facing the darkness and choosing the light.